Welcome back to In Ohio Country today. And we're here at the beautiful UNOH Event Center here in Lima, Ohio, at the annual Ag Breakfast sponsored by the Allen County Chamber of Commerce. And with me today is Greg LaBarge with the Ohio State University Extension Office. Thanks for being with us, Greg.
Yeah, very much appreciate the opportunity.
Well, Greg, you want to tell us a little bit about what you do for Ohio State and Extension, and a little bit about what you were talking about this morning here.
Sure. I work for Extension as a field agronomist, so what I do is work with farmers directly in relationship to issues of crop production. One thing that we've become critically aware of is the water quality impacts of what we do in crop production, so some of the things that I do relate back to that issue, and particularly nutrient management and soil management.
Well, in your presentation, there was a lot of stuff you covered. I think that there were some points that you made about things that ag can control.
Yeah, really, ag controls three things. It controls the erosion rate, or the amount of soil loss that comes off of an individual field. It can change some things from nitrogen and phosphorus management to reduce either rates, make them appropriate, or try and reduce the amount of nutrient that's leaving the site through different management practices.
So we were talking about that. You guys are trying to, obviously science has to have some validity as to how it determines what's transpiring. I thought it was your project that you have, and you have an acronym for, which we have acronyms for everything.
Sure.
I thought as you want to go into talk about that and a little detail about the process that you do with that.
Sure. What we have is we have 20 sites in Northwest Ohio that are called edge of field sites, basically where we're monitoring all the water leaving individual site from both a surface standpoint as well as through the tile system. What we're trying to do is get a quantification of the total water leaving the site, the amount of nutrients that are contained in that, both phosphorus and nitrogen, and then also any sediment that's leaving the site through soil erosion. So it gives us a good idea, and these sites are side by side, so we've got a good calibration of the two comparable sites, and then what we are able to do is put different practices. One site will have no-till, the other site will have tillage to it. We'll put surface application of phosphorus, where we incorporate the phosphorus. And it gives us a good comparison of those different practices, starts to quantify what we need to be doing from a best management practice standpoint in Northwest Ohio, and how effective they are to reduce nutrient and soil erosion losses. I should mention that the project is run by USDA ARS. Dr. Kevin King is the lead scientist on that.
Well, when you were talking about that, I thought it was very interesting to me, particularly when you isolated certain fields. And I thought some of the things that actually contributed to higher percentages of runoff wasn't something that really happened in the last 12 or 24 months.
Correct. I mean, with these sites, and what we see is that not each site contributes equally. So that's part of our challenge, is trying to identify where sites are they're going to be responsive to different best management practices, and where they're going to have an effect on water quality. Absolutely, a high soil test field is one situation where we have monitored that is a result of past management practices. We haven't applied fertilizer on that for 12 years, but still have high levels because it's so highly buffered in the soil. It's going to take that site a while, so we need to look at different practices besides just fertilizer management on some of these sites to have the effect that we're looking for of reducing nutrients.
Yeah, so I think when you're talking about management, one thing that you did point out, and is critical to managing this, is water. How do we manage water?
Yeah, there's really two things that we can manage. We were just talking about the 4R nutrient stewardship type of applications that we can use on some fields, but some fields that we're just not applying nutrients, so that doesn't work. So what we need to think about is water management, in addition to the nutrient management types of things that we do. And that may be filtering. It may be where we use practices to hold water in the field or keep water in the field. Some of those might be simple things like crop changes, winter wheat, cover crops will all reduce the amount of nutrient and water that leaves the site. The other things that we might do are actual structures at the end of tile where we actually hold water back in the field, or as water leaves the site to actually filter that water through a filter that reduces, in this case phosphorus is what we're talking about in a lot of.
Something that when we were talking about water, the other thing that involves water is something that's way beyond our control. It was interesting that you had a chart and it talked about from 1950 to present, and you want to just talk a little bit about that's something that's beyond our control, my control.
Absolutely. Weather and rainfall, when we talk about, and with a lot of our nutrients, we're talking about the soluble nutrient being the issue. So more water is more soluble nutrient moving off site. And what we're seeing, and everybody's experiencing it, even recently here with heavy rainfall events, and what we're seeing is those rainfall events period being more frequent, and the rainfall events of greater than 1.5 inches being even more frequent by fivefold time.
It was very interesting, and quite honestly, it was amazing to me even how many rainfall events we've had that have been 1 inch to 1.5 inches of more now than we had in the period of 1950, for example.
Yeah, and that just keeps the soil saturated, so each event produces more runoff because there's no place in the soil for that water to go. Also increases our erosion problems that we need to think about. So it's a complex system that we work with in agriculture and really trying to manage on a very fine margin, because the effects of nutrient in Lake Erie are so small compared to what we actually need to produce crops on the ground here in western Ohio, that it's a really fine margin that we work on.
Well, you talked about how we control things. You kind of summarized it with like 5 points that you had about what your research is and what you're trying to do with agriculture to help do their part as it relates to the management runoff and nutrient management runoff in the West Erie Lake Basin.
You bet. Number one thing is we still need to continue to look at erosion, and not only what happens in our field from an erosion standpoint, but also in the streams that are moving water away from our fields. Those are two heavy contributors of soil and sediment downstream. Second thing we need to be looking at is really focus in on fields that have a really high soil test level, something that's greater than 150 part per million for AP1. That's the first places that we ought to look for what the contributions are, take our P-index tool, maybe do some monitoring, and look at those fields. Third thing that we need to think about is placement of our nutrient, getting it off the surface wherever we can and however we can fit that into our rotation. Those are really the three key things. From a nitrogen standpoint, we need to think about manure and balancing out the manure nutrient that is nitrogen component, then also then what we need to add as far as fertilizer to finish out that crop. So those four things are really critical and things that we control, and some of them, particularly the nitrogen, has a big economic impact that we can capture from a farming standpoint.
Well, Greg, there's a lot of information that you cover today, and I'm sure we can't touch on it all today, but if somebody wanted more information, where can they go?
Yeah, one of our websites, agcrops.osu.edu, is a good place to go. LaBarge.1 at osu.edu is a good way via email to get a hold of me, and can direct those that have some either very specific questions or some general information, can direct both of those.
Well, Greg, thanks for taking time to be with us today.
You bet. Appreciate the opportunity.
We'll be back with more in Ohio Country Today right after this.
Allen Davis Insurance Agency in Wapakoneta and Minster is your solutions provider. You can trust the experienced professionals at Allen Davis Insurance to protect your assets. Call today and start saving money with multi-policy discounts and more for auto, home, life, business, recreational, total farm protection, and more. Call Allen Davis Insurance Agency in Wapakoneta and Minster. We are your solutions provider. Call 1-800-686-2148.